Hello all, and this is going to be a video essay discussion, if you will, or a footnotes video on Nietzsche's Birth of Tragedy. I wanted to have fun with the Dionysian and Apollonian principles that Nietzsche uses for his aesthetic theory, and used it in discussions on gender relations in hypermodernity. At least that's the goal of this video. So I hope you guys enjoy. So if I was going to start out, I would look back at, where does this Dionysian and Apollonian principle, if you will, come from for Nietzsche. And that influence was from J.J. Bakunin's insight towards the matriarchal imprint that Greek antiquity had underlining the masculine sky gods. And so for Bakunin, if we were going to summarize real quickly here, Bakunin looks at different stages of history. His first stage is interesting enough, perhaps a way that we'll look at later with regards to nature and mystery and its chaos, with society being broken down, not taken into account some sort of abstract principles or a civilization, but the Dionysian chaos, as it were, or the raping and orgies, which is then supplanted with the matriarchy, and so if we take Bakunin's insight that eventually the Apollonian Roman logos is introduced, and the Romans were always in conflict with these matriarchs, because the matriarchy, if we look historically, especially with the Aztecs or other examples, the matriarchy, sacrifice and agrarian sacrifice towards nature comes to mind, certainly, with the Dark Mother, who comes first before then the sort of nurturing mother or the great man. So it's often forgot that when you look at this kind of Dionysian description that Nietzsche gives, it's important to remember that there's that aspect of the Dark Mother and human sacrifice that the Greeks saw and incorporated into tragedy, into their works of art, seeing the mother rip apart human life, and so the Dionysian, in the example of wine, could be seen, of course, as excess. And I think we see in contemporary times this sort of excess really being used in a rather devious way, I think, towards women in current times, with regards to lifestyle. Women have been not so much catered to, but certainly the sort of principle, if you will, of women, having a closeness to nature that man doesn't. And I think you can see that with in a way with Nietzsche comes from a backdrop of biological vitalism that presupposes Schopenhauer's insight of the will with fear and desire, and trying to overcome it with aesthetic appreciation. Physiology now, I think you can see that women are being marketed at for lifestyles of excess, of wine, of consumption, of because there isn't really this imprint that I think is much more lasting with the makeup of the male, and testosterone is something that quite literally will physically destroy man as a vessel itself. This is why life expectancy for a man is lower than that of women. I think that's something to consider with economics today, with that insight of excess really being pushed upon with women and lifestyle choices. If we were going to introduce that as the Dionysian, the women seem to have an intuitiveness towards nature that perhaps man doesn't have with regards to a lens of biological vitalism here. Whereas the Apollonian, the rational form, Nietzsche, interesting enough when he talks of Homer and that the dreamlike scenario as kind of a somewhat of a contrast towards the festivals and rituals of the chaos with the Dionysian, the dreamlike form, that sort of transcendence, the way things ought to be, in that sort of, or trying to apprehend objectively something like noumena. If you were going to look at Kant's distinction of phenomena and noumena, which also is something that you would have to presuppose with these thinkers. Another example, or a thinker, if you will, that I think is really instrumental here to get across, because Camille Paglia, a sort of gendered examination of these principles. I'm not the first to do this. And so Camille, rather explicitly and controversially, would say that civilization is a male contribution. Man is leaving its imprint onto the female Dionysian energy or life-giving of nature. And so man is always obsessed with directing away from this basic truth of life originating from their female counterpart. Man wants to go above just this rude fact that they themselves possess, that I don't think that women certainly seem to have and in a way I think that this makes sense with the principle of women being much closer to nature, since they give life, then there is this sort of deadness or void within man that I was given this life, I was given the Dionysian will, and now I possess it, and now I want to go out in the world and travel away from the matriarch and put my own values, put my own will into the world, which of course is then in sort of dialectic forms the synthesis because, the Dionysian, of course, is attracted to, the strong will, leaving the mark onto the world. There's a sort of desire there, of course. And so the biological differences, of course, with women as mystery, certainly, if you examine genitalia with, the man phallus, it has its direction, it's exposed and, leaves us, vulnerable in a way. Obviously, there's the metaphors of, not thinking clearly and the phallus having a mind of its own. This is the exposure of our genitals, whereas, woman has sort of hiddenness. There, it's tucked away within. And so you can see that in the metaphors of an examination of aesthetics, then there is going to be these sort of differences. That's why there's this biological essentialism that's overlapping here with these ideas. When you look at the chemistry of the way estrogen sort of cancels out, I think if you look at how Bakunin historically was examining the concepts of marriage, stabilizing a civilization, estrogen and its agreeableness and how that factors into the analytics of politics today. Estrogen has the connection towards agreeableness and that sort of canceling out principle, as opposed to testosterone, asserting the will, the sort of destructiveness that and danger that comes with it. And so, if we were going to look at, some of my own thoughts that I gave on that nature versus nurture video several months ago, we could see that, there's a sort of polarity within, the male and female temperament of, a political allegiance with, what is considered, important or truthful in their concerns, or evaluation of what is problem situations, or even the rejection in general of the Dionysian is much more in that sort of irrational idea of feelings, whereas of course the Apollonian is much more logic driven, much more in sort of the analysis of empirical output. And I think you can see that sort of binary here, of course, and how in hypermodernity, this sort of egalitarian democracy, as it's referred to, these sort of differences is actually something I would say is a principle that goes beyond just the physicalness of our biology, but man himself and his own character of trying to get away from the Dionysian womb, and so getting back to what Paglia had to say about the Dionysian and the Apollonian, is that tragedy and how it's picked up in the Western canon and in the Western tradition as our favorite art form is a manifestation of the male hero, but the process of it has a climax, and this is true of our physicalism with regards to the climax and the phallus. There's the building up of the blood to the phallus, and then of course the climax, and then the draining of energy, and when you look at someone like Evola's metaphysics of man giving himself into the abyss, which then will of course come back out through his own will. The Dionysian energy, of course, chooses, just as woman, chooses her mate, and so she's choosing to be what's going to impress into that life giving process. But now I wanted to lead in, of course, with Evola and his metaphysics of sexuality, where he looks at it from his traditional philosophy, as opposed to Christianity, which is more indebted towards resustaining life, giving birth, conception, as it were. That's where life begins. Evola is taking a look at the metaphysics of love across in a perennial way across other cultures and mythologies. And one of the ones that he points at famously is the Greek myth of Hermaphroditus, in the story of Theophrastus, where you have Hermaphroditus, who has both characteristics of male and female, as a story of unity. Evola wants to look at sexuality as a sort of unity of this polarity, or a sort of synthesis to come out of the principles of these abstractions of the Dionysian and the Apollonian. Is what I'm trying to jump at with this video, and to get people to perhaps look at not just the role that your own biology plays towards your own subject or your own life. Of course, that's an important insight that isn't looked at the same or taken for granted, as it were, perhaps prior, where dichotomies like this wouldn't have been thought of. But I think there's something to say as well with when Nietzsche describes the Socratic man and science as a destructive force against aesthetics, or as Spengler will eventually say, towards civilization as a whole concept. Perhaps there's something to be said here about science today and the way it's displaced the subjectivity of these principles having not just something to do with our biology, but actually on a much more abstract and cultured perspective of principle, or transcendence, as Evola would say. And so, if we want to look at this from the ways of trying to create balance, much like the Greeks did with tragedy, as Nietzsche pointed out, but in today's world, with trying to find authenticity with the relationships and the tension. Of course, that's ever been everlasting, as demonstrated in this video. That trying to find harmony, trying to find that unity is of utmost importance, I think, for not just our own lives, but civilization in general. And so yeah, this is a pretty frantic post here, but I had several ideas that I wanted to share with you guys, and I think in part here I'd also say that it's important that man, or men watching this video, to take into account that we should strive towards trying to find that that I that Schopenhauer talks about with aesthetics, with not just letting these factors of desire and fear, or even the in today's world with complex structures, or living in an alienating hyper-modern society, or a collapsing one, that still, despite this, we're still trying to create some sort of unity, of copulation, of trying to complement each other, and still create art in the face of tragedy, of these circumstances that we're thrown into. So yeah, hope you guys like and subscribe to this video, and I think the next one we will discuss Nietzsche's influence towards postmodernity and his epistemology and theory of knowledge, and brush up on that. So yeah, thanks for watching, guys, and I hope you guys enjoy.